In late 2012, a rust-streakened research vessel sliced through the Coral Sea, northwest of New Caledonia. On board, a group of Australian geologists scanned GPS coordinates, their expressions a mix of skepticism and curiosity. The sea was calm, blue, empty. But every map they had told them otherwise. According to Google, to the British Admiralty, to over a century of cartographic authority, there should have been land here. A long, narrow strip, 24 kilometres wide, marked clearly, Sandy Island. It was supposed to be routine, confirm its geological composition, collect data, and move on. But as the ship reached the coordinates, the sonar told a different story. There was no shallow water, no seafloor rising beneath them, just cold, crushing depth, nearly 1,400 metres of ocean. That's when the murmurs began. On board, researchers looked at each other in disbelief. Sandy Island did not exist. What they had discovered wasn't a place. It was a ghost. A lie that had slipped through the cracks of time, hidden in plain sight. But this wasn't a minor clerical error. Sandy Island had been charted since 1908. It was published in atlases, labelled on naval charts, listed in world databases, even appearing on Google Maps with a visible shadowy patch. For over a century, everyone had agreed it was real, and yet, standing on deck, staring at endless ocean, that belief dissolved into uncertainty. The story begins with a ship, a whaling vessel called the Velocity. In the early 20th century, during one of its routine voyages, the crew allegedly spotted land in the Coral Sea. Volcanic in appearance, they said, barely charted and likely uninhabitable. They recorded the coordinates, sent them off to London, and without further confirmation, Sandy Island was born. It entered British naval charts not as a curiosity but as fact. Once something makes it onto an official chart, it becomes canon. Every subsequent map, whether printed by governments or commercial publishers, copied the data. Errors, it turns out, are contagious. Sandy Island spread from map to map, like folklore, but no one asked questions. Who would? It was just an island. Decades passed. The world changed. Satellites began to orbit. GPS triangulated the globe with pinpoint accuracy, yet somehow Sandy Island survived the digital purge. In the early 2000s, it even appeared on Google Maps. A dark smudge on the screen, undefined, just enough to suggest something was there. Pilots and mariners alike marked it in their systems, not because they'd seen it, but because everyone else had. Back home, the discovery triggered ripples across the scientific community. How had this happened? Theories emerged, and with them a darker side of cartography. Some believed the original sighting by the Velocity was a mirage. In tropical regions, optical illusions on the horizon are common. Cloud formations or pumice rafts floating from underwater eruptions can look like distant land. Others suspected it was a clerical error, a digit off in the coordinates, a misread of shadows and waves. But then came the copyright theory. Mapmakers, especially in the 20th century, had a secret weapon to protect their intellectual property. Trapped streets, fake entries, a non-existent cul-de-sac, a fictional creek. Insert something unique. If it appeared in a rival's map, you had proof of theft. Sandy Island, some argued, may have been one of those. A ghost inserted not to fool the public, but to catch a plagiarist. The problem? It worked too well. Sandy Island passed from chart to chart until even governments believed it was real. It entered maritime law, weather databases, shipping routes. And like all good lies, it became true through repetition. Even in the digital age, the island refused to die. As data from old naval logs was digitised, Sandy Island migrated into modern systems. It didn't need confirmation. It had lineage, authority, legacy. By the time the mistake was realised, Sandy Island had become a phantom with credentials. When the news broke, Google removed the island from its maps with no fanfare. One day it was there, the next gone. No official statement, no public correction. For those who noticed, it was unsettling. How many other islands were illusions? How much of the world had been inherited on trust, not truth? There's a reason this matters more than it seems. Maps are not just tools. They shape perception. They tell us where we are, where we're going, and what's possible. When something like Sandy Island can exist for over a century without challenge, it forces us to confront the fragility of our certainty. Dr. Seaton's team wasn't just correcting a database. They were challenging the authority of a shared illusion. And in doing so, they uncovered something larger, a system built not on proof, but on assumption. In the wake of Sandy Island's deletion, cartographers worldwide began reviewing their records. Other phantom islands emerged: Burmaca, Emerald Island, Doherty Island. Some had even richer histories. Explorers claimed to land there. Some had journal entries. But none could be found. Even today, explorers and historians debate how many more phantoms lurk in the pages of our maps. Some are relics of ancient myths, others are deliberate deceptions. But Sandy Island is different. It was a mistake that became a truth. A shared delusion printed, distributed, and believed by generations. Sometime around 10 a.m. on that day in 2012, as the research vessel floated over the supposed location of Sandy Island, the crew took a moment. The coordinates were precise, the weather clear, nothing stood in their way, and yet there was nothing to find. They stared into a void that shouldn't have existed, and realised they were witnessing the erasure of a lie that had masqueraded as fact. The truth didn't rise from the ocean floor, it simply exposed itself by absence. No land, no reef, no explanation that could restore the island's reality. Just a digital silence, a cartographic ghost deleted with a keystroke. And for the first time in over 100 years, the Coral Sea was whole again.